Hey, it's been a while since the last upload, which was this video as part of brackeys Game Jam. Last video came out in October, I took a break, and then thought I could speedrun turning this demo into a complete game in just a couple weeks. I'm now editing this video in March. I started off with folder management since I was no longer in Game Jam mode, and straight after that I'm not sure what this next clip is. It looks like I'm trying to click a corner, which doesn't do anything, so off to a good start. Next I needed ideas for what to work on, and there's no better place than directly from player feedback. So I collated a list of tasks and created a Trello board, which I don't normally do, but I thought it might be fun. At this point I came up with a proper name for this game. Turns out StormWave is also the name of a music band and a Warhammer figure, and I've already recorded these clips, so just got to hope neither of them get mad at me. While playing around with Trello, something I discovered was being able to automate actions, so I made a random task selector, and now when I click Gimme Next, next is gimmied, with the first task being Pixel Art Standardization. I'm not 100% sure what this means, but I assume it's referring to how my terrain, player, and enemies all have different base pixel resolutions when you compare them against each other. Luckily I still have the sprites saved, so I went through each one and standardized them, whatever that means. I started off with the main tile sheet that I used for the backgrounds and buildings, and used 4 pixels as the base size, as well as trying out some outlines and shading. Next up is the player, where the biggest changes are the cannon and the little character, which are now more in line with the rest of the boat. I also realised that the player scale in the game is set to twice the size, which goes against consistency, so I amended the sprite to fix the tiny size, followed by cropping issues, and the cannonball spawning in the wrong place. After all of these adjustments behind the scenes, it looks exactly the same as before, so no idea if it even makes a difference. Anyways, I moved on to the other entities and went through the same process with new sprite sheets. This actually required redoing each of the animations and took 3 nights to complete, followed by a day of fixing the spawner to accommodate the new entity sizes since enemies would spawn inside of each other, and cannonballs couldn't reach the enemies even after moving the cannon to the centre of the boat. After fixing my bugs and dealing with Godot's bugs, everything is now working, or at least I thought it was. Oh man, but after that I get to move this task into done. Only 10 more to go and hopefully the rest will be quicker. Can you guess what the next one is? Animation effects. So let's start with the effects. I made a new particle effect for firing cannons, where I couldn't decide between an explosion or a smoke effect, so I went with both. Next I added a lit particle to the cannon to show when the player's finished reloading. Ignore the fact that this takes place in the rain. If the game looks cool, logic can be ignored. Other than particles, I added some fade animations for submarines surfacing and civilians reaching land. And with that done marks the second task complete. So satisfying moving them into done. And the next one is damage states, which is how to tell if an enemy is previously damaged and how much health is remaining. There's 2 easy approaches I can go for. One is a basic health bar above each enemy, and the second is a cosmetic crack on enemy boats that gets bigger as health decreases, similar to my turtle that I made a year ago. Wow, the channel's already a year old. Anyways, I decided not to go for this cosmetic approach as I need a new visual for each level of health, with the strong pirate having 5 hit points, and that would probably increase since I can beat it with 0 upgrades. So health bar it is, which I also apply to regular enemies and submarines, which now seem to be invisible. I also plan to add some health to the player, but I'm saving that for another task. I did however add a new particle effect for collisions, which I missed out in the last task, and getting distracted will be a common theme going forwards. As you can see, it wasn't going quite right, but eventually I got it all sorted, so collision effects are now matching the point of contact, with no broken physics. And with that done, we can go on to the next task. Gimme Next will give me an intro scene, which is something I had an idea for since the start of the project, but I didn't have time during the jam. Before making a cinematic, I got to work on a main menu, which should be a nice warm-up since it's not my first time working with UI, and yet I really struggled for some reason. This footage is from my 1-hour session, and this is the result. Yeah, it's not going great, and the main menu is supposed to be the easy part. To be fair, not knowing what scene to create, which is the first step, wasn't a good sign right from the start. I messed around with parent nodes and VBox containers alongside anchors and themes until I got something that looked okay. Apparently this took another 90 minutes, but at least I have something usable now. You may notice that I removed the exit button, and that's because I don't think it's needed in a browser game, and not because I want to trap players in the game. Anyways, with the main menu connected, it's time for the intro scene, which you can see it play out. As well as being a fun little cutscene, one main focus was highlighting the restaurant, which until now didn't have anything to do with the gameplay. And while that still hasn't changed, at least there's now a plot that gives some context. And yes, there's a skip button too, which I did use a lot. This cutscene also led me to finding a new favourite Godot node, being the Path 2D node, which I combined with a sprite animation to form this flying paper effect, which I really like. To finish off the intro, I added a fading scene transition and established goals for the player. Going back to the UI, I also found how to fix the blurring on labels by scaling the font size instead of transform scales. And now we can move on to the next task. After all of that, I don't want to work on any more arts and graphics for a while. Well, that's great. More visuals. The upgrade visuals have been broken ever since the first task, so I guess it's something I should fix. Luckily I could reuse the new tile map, so I only had to amend the tile map layers with a new visual per star rating. And it was around this point where I finally decided to make use of temporarily changing stats like current wave and gold to test late game changes faster, instead of having to play through multiple waves just to test the end game. On another note, I added a zoom out effect during combat so the stars wouldn't be cropped at the top, and here's the zoom back in. I added these transitions to give a better view of the restaurant, but it ended up improving the general feel of the game anyways, so it looks like work on the visuals are going well. I failed by hitting a civilian, which wasn't even on the screen yet. I forgot to add game balancing and bug fixes in my to-do list, so might as well take a look now. There's a couple issues, like being so overpowered that the last wave is easier than the first, and the victory screen being broken because I messed with the font scaling earlier. While the latter was simple to fix, the upgrade system needed a few changes. I started with the reload speed since there was never a need for semi-automatic firing. I kept the max upgrade at 2 shots per second, except it was allowing 1 extra purchase. This is the logic behind the scenes, and even if you're not a coder, can you tell me if 0.5 is at most less than or equal to 0.5? In my opinion, 0.5 is 0.5, so that should be true. But Godot seems to disagree, even when I hardcode the validation. Well, it's not like I can't use the strict less than sign instead, so that's the reload upgrade sorted. As for the damage upgrades, I'm leaving it as it is, but increasing the health of the enemies so the scaling remains balanced throughout the waves. I also broke the player movement after adding a new upgrade stat for movement speed. Ignore me hacking in 70 gold on round 2. And after amending the button focus modes, we can now move this task into done, even though the last few changes had nothing to do with visual upgrades. And now we're reaching the halfway point, with the next task being alternative soundtracks. Last time I rushed and only spent 5 minutes on a single track, but now I have all the time to make additional tracks for the different scenes. I ended up wasting the first half an hour searching for the original editable track, which I probably forgot to save, so I started from scratch, and then I struggled to find the same instrument that I used last time, which was annoying because I liked the original. Lesson learnt, save your files. Something I didn't learn was how to make good music, since I'm still throwing around random notes through trial and error until I get something that sounds decent. In my case, the 27th attempt, and then I added the tracks to the game. And the next task on the list happened to be sound effects, which means I can continue working on audio. At this point you may be wondering why I haven't shared any of the new audio, and that's because it was only now that I realised the whole audio section was recorded without any audio. Fun times. So I went back and recorded them, this time with audio, and I'll let them play in the background. When it comes to creating sound effects, I assume they would be easier than making full music tracks, but finding a balance between the two is what I found to be the hard part, since they can sound out of place if they're two different styles. Unrelated, but this panic scene is probably my favourite part. But back to the sound effects, I added them to the game over and victory screens. I decided to leave out sounds for firing cannonballs, since you could be firing every half a second and I couldn't come up with a sound that wasn't annoying to hear. The last sound effect that I worked on was for shop upgrades, and now we can say sounds are complete. The done list is getting quite long now. Can you guess the next task? You've got a 1 in 4 chance. Increasing the calm period timer. Definitely the most requested piece of feedback, and by far the quickest to fix. Bam, no more complaining. On to the next task, which will be the last gameplay focus change, and that's collision health. I mentioned earlier that I would come back to handling player health, which at the moment seems to be infinite. If you wanted to, you could beat the whole game without firing a single cannonball. To fix this, I gave the player some health. I decided on 3 hit points, which meant adding cosmetic cracks to the sprite sheet wouldn't be too bad. Time to test the changes. And I forgot to import the new textures, so I tried it again and used the wrong number of pixels. 3rd time's the charm, 4th time's the charm, and that's working nicely, with each collision bringing the boat closer to sinking. Next I adjusted collisions with civilians, since it was a bit harsh that crashing meant game over, and waiting could also mean game over. Now when bumping into civilians, you lose income for that wave as compensation. As for artillery assault on an innocent civilian, yeah, that's still on you. Going back to the health bar versus damage state discussion, I did find that using both can cover for each of their weaknesses, so I ended up going back and making that change. A cracked boat would show that the player is damaged, without needing a constant health bar that breaks the aesthetic between rounds. However, a crack on its own doesn't exactly show how much health is remaining unless you memorise the states, so that's where a temporary health bar comes in, which also helps to convey that large boats deal more damage. I did also add a final sound effect for collisions, with of course a suitable name. And after all that backtracking, we're now onto the final two tasks. I was hoping thumbnails and HIO page would be the last task, as that would make sense when the game would be complete, but I guess we're doing it now. Instead of updating the game, I decided to make a new HIO page, so I can look back and compare the two versions to remind myself how long I've spent finishing a game that was already 90% done. I exported the game to HTML, having somewhat remembered what buttons to press from last time, and the upload was successful, apart from the fact that I forgot to turn off my debugging hacks, so you start on the final wave with a bunch of gold. But moving on from the game itself, during the game jam I was surprised by how nice some of the game pages were. And then there's mine, not a high bar to beat. After discovering the edit theme button, I played around with different options while deciding what to do for the cover image. Last time I used a quick screenshot while rushing at 3 in the morning, but this time I dragged and dropped sprites into a new Godot scene with its only purpose for taking a screenshot, but at least it's edited this time. As for the rest of the page, I added some colours, a banner at the top, some gameplay screenshots, and made use of my water sprite sheet for the background, which looks alright, until you open the game and it becomes distracting. All of this is new to me, and it clearly shows when I'm on my 7th attempt at making a background that I'm satisfied with, which would have been longer if I didn't search how big this middle section is. Made it so much easier. And this is the final result. I wonder what the last task will be. Okay, so for this, the controls aren't exactly complex, and I did include them in the description, but it does give me a reason to add something to this plain main menu. I'm too lazy to add sound settings, so we'll make do with this. I created some tutorial pages with buttons that don't work, and stun locked myself for a solid 5 seconds wondering what just happened. The aim was an interactive tutorial, but instead I got whatever this is. Upon further investigation, I found it was caused by the button to fire also triggering a new tutorial scene to be made every time it was pressed, which ended up stacking on top of each other, all because I was lazy and overlaid the tutorial over the main menu. After setting the focus type to none, everything is finally coming together. That's all for the tutorial, and that's all for the Trello board. It served me well. I wonder what happens if I click Gimme Next when there's no task remaining. Nothing happened, not sure what I was expecting. So I've completed everything that I've set out to do, but I wasn't satisfied with calling it done just yet. First I created a notification for each combination of objective achieved that you see at the start, followed by multiple playthroughs of the game to check game balancing for both spawn difficulties and economy scaling. I found it was occasionally a challenge to meet both objectives in the same run, which I think makes it more interesting. Last but not least, I remembered to re-upload the game, this time without hacking in infinite gold, and finally relaxed, but only after accepting that it's not going to be bug-free. For the HTML builds, particles still aren't showing on some devices, and there's a grey flicker when changing scenes, which fade animations don't seem to help. As for development, Godot hasn't been perfect, but neither has other game engines, although I just heard that Godot version 4.4 has now been released, so I can't complain. I don't know if it was the game jam or Godot, maybe both, but I found it encouraging to try new things, like working with audio and tile sheets for the first time, and overall it's been a good experience, even though with this iteration I've spent most of my time creating graphics and music, neither of which I'm good at, but at least I can call this a somewhat complete game, unlike this one which I need to get back to work on. This was supposed to be a quick project, but it turns out my game wasn't as close to being finished as I thought, but maybe that's just common when publishing a game. Combine this with getting bored of my own game, leading to burnout and cutting corners, it makes sense that people including myself start so many unfinished projects. I spent so long working on this project that the next brackeys game jam has already finished, so congrats to the winners. But that's all from me, and if you want to play this game, the link will be in the description like last time. But as always, thank you all for watching.